So let's talk about geographic exceptions, or GEs in Hawaii, since that's what we're currently going through with our oldest son. If you're sending your kid to private school, then you don't need to worry. But if you're like us and many other families in Hawaii and looking primarily at public school here, well, GEs are sort of a way to get your kid into better public schools. And for many local parents, it's a very stressful time. What school should we apply to? Will my kid get in, and when will we hear back? And so I want to share what we're doing with GEs, or our strategy for applying, and maybe other parents can relate or will find it helpful. And as someone who has benefited from GEs as well as now applying for my own kid, I'm actually kind of conflicted about the whole GE process, but I'll talk about that later. By the way, I'm trying out my new camera. How's it looking? Pretty good.
Hello from Hawaii.
So in case you aren't familiar with how public schools work here in Hawaii, kids are required to attend the school in the geographic area in which they live. Now, if you live in an area with a good public school, well, then you're all set. But if you live in an area with a maybe not so good school, too bad. But that's where the geographic exception comes in. The DOE allows students to attend schools outside of their geographic area for certain reasons, such as authorized physical residence, the child is a staff member of a particular school, a sibling goes to that school, or program of study. And if you're like most families applying for GEs in Hawaii, you're probably going to put program of study or other reason. For my family growing up, because my parents worked in town, that was the reason. It was just a lot more convenient to do drop off and pick up. Now, geographic applications are accepted from January 1st to March 1st, and they let you know a couple of weeks into March, of course, pending lottery results or anything like that. Okay, I should walk around and test this camera out, I think, a little bit better. So what is our GE strategy gonna be? Well, we're applying to 7 to 8 schools for various reasons, but the most common is reputation of school. Now, I don't really like the fact that there are better public schools. I kind of wish all the schools were about the same, but there are so many factors that affect an educational experience, such as teachers, facilities, programs, and other students. Although maybe there's a nicer way to say it, like maybe all the public schools have a base level of education quality, but then some just happen to exceed that. Now, if you want to know what the best public schools you got to apply for, well, all you got to do is really just ask around. I made a video about that a while ago, but it's been a while and I'm sure that list has changed. However, I will say that one of the schools that we are applying to is a school that I actually graduated from, because I went to private school and then public school. It's a pretty good school, but I just want my sons, if they have the opportunity, to be able to go to the same school that I did, at least for elementary. Now, we're planning on applying the first thing in January. I don't know if that affects likability of getting in, or if it's just pure lottery up until that point. But we're just gonna wait until March and see, and once we know what schools that my son is in, then we can go ahead and make that decision. And sure, we want our son to go to the best possible school, but from what we learned with preschool, it's actually what the best fit is, and not necessarily like the best school. And I think that's very important. So we'll have to talk about that and evaluate that, and then decide what the best fit for him might be. While we're still applying for my son to go, and I myself had benefited from it, as I look at the program now, I can't help but feel a little conflicted. I mean, yes, I hear what all the parents are saying, and personally, I have my own preferences and biases towards certain schools, but when I take a step back and look at what GEs are doing and kind of how they're fluctuating student population, I do pause a little bit. Because ultimately what I think the GE program does is it congregates certain types of students into, quote, better schools. And what that does for the home schools is, well, they lose those kids, but they also lose certain amounts of funding. And instead of having public schools that are more reflective of that particular community, at least on a more micro level, what we have instead are kids that go to certain schools that are from all over the island, which may be a good thing in a way, but one of the things that I like about public schools is that it represents a particular area. I mean, if you take a school like Kahuku, for example, or Mililani, those schools really represent those communities well. But if a lot of kids GE into a particular school, well, then they don't really live in that area, and they aren't necessarily a reflection of that very local community. And as someone who has benefited from GEs, reflecting now, I kind of see it as a little bit sad. Because I grew up in Kanyohe and all my friends were in town, I never really got that close to school experience, you know, where you could walk to school, you could bike to school, could bus to school. I mean, I always had to be dropped off super early and then of course picked up pretty late because my parents had to work. And I think that you lose something, especially in neighborhoods where the kids don't all go to the same school anymore. Like back when my dad was growing up in Waipahu, everybody went to the same school. You just moved up and that was kind of nice in a way. And so what I think it does is it creates this imbalance. Now, just talking about town, for example, you have all the kids in town and some of them live in these wonderful, beautiful condos. And if they live in those condos, most likely, they're probably going private school, and that's totally fine. But then there are a lot of families who live in this town area where they send their kid to public school, and that's also totally fine. But I think a lot of them try to get into the good schools. Imagine if all of those kids went to their home school, including my boys. What if we all went to their town schools and maybe they aren't rated the best, but that's just the schools that we all happen to go to. I do have to ask and wonder if all of these kids who would normally go to the better schools had to go to their home schools, would we see improvements in some of these home schools, like in some of these other schools where a lot of kids are opting to GE out of? And again, coming back to town, there are some highly regarded elementary schools here in town. I won't mention them, but if you know, you know. And some of these highly regarded public schools are in fact so good that they're basically private school prep schools. But then what I think is happening is all these families that are looking at that private school track, maybe after elementary school, are sending their kids to these better public schools. And then you have this huge concentration of a certain type of family, which is probably a good thing for families that do want to pursue that track, because you have all these like-minded families, these like-minded kids that will be making that ultimate journey. Ultimate journey? Okay, maybe not ultimate journey. But then that creates this imbalance. And what do we do with that? Again, imagine if those families, those maybe ambitious families, decided to send their kids to their home school, and those, let's just say, ambitious families or ambitious kids were more spread out in the public school system. Wouldn't that have a positive impact overall on student learning if you have more of those kids spread out? And yeah, maybe they don't have access to certain resources or certain programs, but maybe that would push other schools to include those things, because now they have families that want those things. And so as we're going through this process, I hope that my son gets into a good school, but really what I mean by that is a school that I think will benefit him, that he will thrive at. But again, I do wonder if GEs have this unintentional consequence, which labels some schools as good and other schools as bad, and really how that affects the education system for the students and, I guess in a way, the teachers. And of course I had to ask myself, well, if you're so conflicted, isn't it hypocritical that you are applying for GE for your son? And I think it's a very good observation, but I think it's okay to be mindful and self-reflective of a situation without necessarily it being hypocritical. Because I realize that this isn't something that I feel strong enough as a conviction. There are definitely other things that I will put my money where my mouth is, that I will definitely back up with my actions from the words that I say and the thoughts that I have. But when it comes to this GE thing, I don't feel that strong about it. But it's just something that I'm thinking about. And so to all the parents going through this GE application process, good luck. So thanks for watching, and aloha.